Welcome to our Friday video. So it is election week and there's a lot of talk of politics going on, quite understandably. So what I would like to do with today's video is try to place environmental economics within the political spectrum or kind of talk about how some environmental economic ideas align with conservatives and with liberals. And so, of course, these are generalizations. They don't perfectly characterize any people or even the discipline as a whole. But my take on kind of how environmental economics fits in to some different political debates and discussions. So most people who are thinking a lot about the environment, again, this is most, not all, but so most environmentalists tend to lean liberal. So organizations like Sierra Club and Greenpeace, they tend to support more liberal, so in the US, Democrat sort of candidates. In a lot of countries, there are strong Green Party movements that are explicitly focused on the environment. Those parties tend to be left-wing. And so there's even a Green Party within the US. Since we have two major political parties, we don't hear about it as much as in some parliamentary systems where many different parties have seats. So here we don't see Green Party people elected to statewide or national level office very often, if at all. But you do see them on the ballot fairly often. But so environmentalists tend to be liberal. This probably comes as no surprise to any of you. Economists are often thought of as being pretty conservative, generally speaking. So economists study markets and the power of markets and how individual decision makers can act in ways that may even be driven mostly by self-interest, but that we can still end up at outcomes that can do lots of good things. They can have efficiency characteristics that we like. We can pull people out of poverty. We can do lots of things through markets. And so politically that often aligns with conservative, or in the US, the Republican Party, because allowing markets to be a powerful force in society means that we're not relying on government to do too much, an expansive amount. So an extreme example, socialism is when the government controls the means of production. Instead of organizing our economy through markets, it's organized by central planners. And so in political discussions in this country and many others, you often hear debates over socialism. Economists, as a group, tend to fall pretty solidly on the side of anti-socialist, as far as anti-organizing a society through a central planner, having the government control the means of production. So this fits in with what we recently talked about with things like private property rights can be a powerful force. Liability laws can be a powerful force. When we're talking about environmental protection, people through these decentralized means can actually do a lot. So that is the opposite of kind of a socialist idea of where the government would take control of the factories that are polluting and it would make decisions that it thinks are in the best interest of people. A decentralized process is kind of the opposite of that. And generally speaking, economists tend to favor that kind of decentralized decision-making, whether it's in markets to buy stuff, or even when it comes to some environmental topics. So where does that leave environmental economists? So we've got the liberal lean of the environmental, and we've got the conservative lean of the economist part. Probably not too surprisingly, environmental economists I think of as often being kind of in the middle. So if you were a pessimist, you might say they make everyone upset. So an environmental economist is frustrating to some conservatives because they're talking about how often markets fail and how important it is for governments to be able to step in to handle things like negative externalities of pollution. So they believe in markets, but they also are pointing out how often market failure occurs, and that leaves an active role for governments in ways that some conservatives don't like. Environmental economists often upset environmentalists because even though the environmental economist is saying that there's a lot of value in environmental amenities and things like ecosystem services, they are espousing the use of markets in many cases to handle things more efficiently. And this often is not received well by ardent environmentalists who believe that there's kind of infinite value, things are priceless, and so attempting to put values, dollar signs on things is immoral. And they would tend to see, they tend to want much more direct action, command and control sort of regulation from the government, instead of what environmental economists are often talking about, trying to harness market forces to regulate more efficiently. We'll be talking a little bit more about that over the last few weeks of the class. But so politically, environmental economists, they run the gamut. As with pretty much any group you look at, you can find some quite conservative, like free market environmentalists. There's even think tanks and such that kind of position themselves as conservatives who are thinking about the environment and trying to use markets as opposed to having the government play a strong role in a command and control sort of sense when they're regulating. You also get very liberal, left-leaning environmental economists. You know, Greenpeace now has economists working for them, with them. So even groups that are very left of center have adopted, and I've talked about this a little bit with the kind of the closing gap between environmental economics and ecological economics, where people who espouse to ecological economics view shied away from putting values on things that the environment provides to us. That has largely been left aside. And so now even very liberal environmental groups do work with economists for the most part. Not every single one, but most of them. So you find environmental economists who span the political spectrum, but generally speaking, a lot of them end up being kind of in the middle somewhere. And so if you're a pessimist, sometimes it feels like the left doesn't like you because you're too into markets, and the right doesn't like you because you're thinking too much about the environment and market failures. But if you're an optimist, you can see it as kind of a bridge building role. So, the left appreciates what you're doing because they sense that you care about the environment and you are acknowledging great value provided by environmental quality. The right is willing to work with you because you acknowledge that markets are really powerful forces. So, like with most things, you can look at it as glass half full or glass half empty. With my research, I actually really enjoy trying to find kind of topics that have some area of common ground that people across the political spectrum could at least potentially agree on. So with the endangered species, if we acknowledge that having really strict command and control regulation of endangered species habitat leads to preemptive habitat destruction because of these perverse incentives, we could all agree that getting rid of or dampening at least those perverse incentives can make the endangered species better off and the landowners better off. It can make the regulator's job easier. So it's an area where you can find win-win sort of potential solutions. So that's my take on how environmental economics kind of fits within the world of politics, which is swirling around us at a rapid pace these days with all this election stuff going on. But so I'll leave it at that for this Friday video. We will be jumping into some other topics. I'll be posting an announcement about what our reading for next week is going to look like, because we are going to bounce around just a little bit here. Thanks.